Good evening, everyone. Mic check on Leah.
I can hear you, Mark.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Baltell. I'm the statewide salmon and steelhead manager for the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight, we are here as part of our North of Falcon season setting process. We are here to talk through recreational seasons for Puget Sound marine areas, as well as taking a look at Puget Sound freshwater areas. On the screen in front of you tonight is a slide describing kind of our meeting logistics ground rules. I'll go through those briefly. We realize as we do these things that some of the things on the slide may not apply to everybody on the call. So I'm just going to kind of talk through a little bit. The most important thing for the people on the phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. And you can mute and unmute yourself by pressing *6. For those of you on the computer, there's a number of different ways to raise your hand, depending on what version of Zoom you have. It may be a little bit different. For some of you, there's just a raised hand down at the bottom. For some of you, there's a little button that says emotions that allows you to raise your hand. Another way to do it in different versions is to click on the participants list, and you can select a raise hand there as well. As part of our meeting tonight, we ask that people be respectful of each other. Please mute your phone line when you're not speaking. We invite you to be tough on the issues and the questions you ask, but please not on people or organizations. We ask that you not level any personal attacks, insults, or threats. We ask you to be an active listener, speak and act as professionally as you can, trying to understand, to be respectful of each other. Also understand that there's quite a number of people on the line who want to provide feedback and ask questions. So try to limit your hand raising as much as you can, or condense your topics into kind of one broad theme. Just so everyone knows, tonight's meeting is being recorded. It will be available on our website for viewing later. I would also invite those of you who have not been able to attend or listen in, or you're new to the process. All of our meetings this year are being recorded or on the website. We also have quite a bit of information on our website, forecasts, proposed season materials, meeting materials, all sorts of different things that help you understand what we're doing here. Again, if you have any technical issues tonight, we invite you to use the chat feature to ask those questions. Leah Snyder, who's our admin assistant who helps with these meetings, is a really excellent source of helping people through their issues. Next slide, please. So again, focusing on Puget Sound tonight, we're going to do just a quick review of the forecasts, touch a little bit on our Chinook and Coho management objectives, which kind of drive our seasons. We're going to take a look at some modeling that's been done. We're going to, like I said, we're going to look a little bit at some of the freshwater considerations as well as marine area season considerations. And then, of course, the most important thing we're here to do tonight is to take public comment on what we're trying to put together for salmon seasons this year. Many of you are familiar with the North of Falcon process, but as we're doing these virtual meetings, we're finding many people are new and turning in for the first time. So this is a quick and dirty view of kind of the North of Falcon process as a whole. It starts in January, February, when we produce forecasts for each of these salmon stocks and species. From there, we see where those abundances are in relation to management objectives and escapement needs for both hatchery and natural brood stocking goals. We determine if there's harvestable surplus. We propose fisheries. We use models, management models, to help us determine where and when we can prosecute fisheries and how that relates to our conservation constraints, particularly on Chinook and Coho. During this process, we negotiate with the treaty co-manager tribes and other states for fair sharing and catch of impacts. Finally, once we get to the end of the process around mid-April, we have a final agreed to fishing package. It's called the LOAF, the List of Agreed Fisheries. It describes all our fisheries for the ocean, Puget Sound, Columbia River. Next slide, please. Also, every year as part of our North of Falcon process, we have to do rulemaking to make rules so we can publish those in a pamphlet and have our fisheries be legal under the Administrative Procedures Act. So this starts in January with what's called a CR 101 filing. Basically, it's a notice of that we're going to open up these rules for consideration of changes. Between that and the next part of the rulemaking would be a 102 filing, where essentially we publish what rules we're proposing to change and why we're making those changes. Through that first part and second part is what we're doing right now. It's the North of Falcon process where we're taking public comment on seasons. Following that CR 102 filing, we also take written comments and have a public hearing on any proposed modifications. We also identify any errors that were caught as part of this process. Finally, this gets to CR 103 filing with what's called a concise explanatory statement, or CES, that explains the reasons why we put the rules in place. The director signs those and they go into effect 31 days after that. Next slide, please. Here, I am going to pause and turn it over to Dr. Kirsten Simonson, our recreational biologist for Puget Sound.
Thanks, Mark. So I'm just going to kind of go through a quick forecast recap. For those who have been on one of our previous meetings, you might have heard some of this before, but just want to make sure that everybody has the information. So for Puget Sound Chinook, overall natural stocks are down about 20% and hatchery stocks are down about 2% from the recent 10-year average. For Coho, natural stocks are down about 15% and hatchery stocks are up 35% from the 10-year average. For Puget Sound Pink, the forecast is down about 31% from the 10-year average. And for Chum, the natural stocks are down 61% and hatchery stocks are down 64% from the 10-year average. Next slide, please. So just to kind of give you a little bit more in-depth look at some of the for each species. So for Chinook overall, again, as we said, the forecast for the natural are down. You can see there's about a 7% decrease from last year. You can see where most of the stocks are down except for the Green River. Next one for hatchery for Chinook. Again, mostly down about 11% overall from last year. Puyallup has an increase, but everything else is, you can see where it's trending. Next slide, please. For Coho, we're seeing a bit of improvement for natural stocks from last year, but keep in mind that we're also down from the 10-year average, but we have seen some rebounds since last year, which is good. Next slide. So for Coho Hatchery, again, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, slight increase from last year, and there is an increase again for the 10-year average, but a bit of a mixed bag compared to last year. For the pink, you can see in 2019, we had forecasted about 600,000 returns, forecasted 600,000. The return was right around 3 million, which is what we're forecasting to see this year for returns. And you can kind of see the trends over the past several years. So just to give you a bit more of a breakdown for pink salmon for each of the river basins. And again, you can see that what we're forecasting is about 3 million to return. For chum, the news is not so great. We are forecasting about 500,000 returns, and you can see that this is down from last year and down quite a bit from the previous 10 years. And then from here, I'm going to turn it over to, I think Derek is going to take over from here to talk about some of the management objectives moving forward.
Thanks for that, Kirsten. And so on this slide that you see in front of you, we're going to be going over our Chinook management objectives for Puget Sound. But before I get into that, I thought it would be a good idea to cover some acronyms that we're using here in the management world. And apologies for those who've been on kind of a few of these calls. I know I've gone through this information a few times now, but it is important for those who might be their first times or maybe one of their first times tuning in. So the first acronym that we use in the management world that I thought I might go over is ER, and that stands for an exploitation rate. And what an exploitation rate is it represents the percent of the adult population of a given stock that's being removed by either a fishery or by a grouping of fisheries. We use different ER metrics for management in Puget Sound. And the first one that I would cover is a total ER metric. A total ER metric, when we have that as our management objective, represents the removals of a stock across all fisheries along the West Coast. Another management metric that we sometimes use is an SUS ER, and SUS stands for Southern US Exploitation Rate, is what we're looking at there. And by the Southern US exploitation rate, we're looking at the removals only occurring in fisheries south of Canada. In some stocks, we're using what's called a PT-SUS ER rate. And that PT-SUS stands for pre-terminal Southern US. And what that represents is that represents fisheries that are occurring in the marine areas south of Canada. In this list that we have in front of you, as far as the Chinook objectives for Puget Sound, I would just highlight kind of two changes from the norm on here. The first one is Skagit Summer Falls. That's a stock that we're seeing forecast as below the low abundance threshold. And this year we have a 17% SUS management objective. It's a little bit different than last year. Skagit Springs are also projected to be below their low abundance threshold. And we can see for this year, we're having a 10.3% SUS ER management objective. Two other stocks that I wanted to highlight specifically for Chinook are the Stilaguamish and Midhoot Canal Chinook. Starting with the Stilaguamish, that's been a stock that has been constraining to marine fisheries in recent years. And we can see for this year, we have a 22% total exploitation rate objective, as well as an 8% unmarked SUS exploitation rate objective and 12% marked SUS exploitation rate objective. For Midhoot Canal, you can see that right now it's labeled as to be determined. We're working with our regional co-managers on that stock, and we might have a management objective update for you guys in the near future there. Moving to the next slide, please. So for Coho, I might highlight two changes from last year. Well, maybe one change from last year, which is the Stilaguamish. Stilaguamish has bumped up an abundance tier for Coho relative to last year. And we can see that the total ER ceiling has changed from a 35% objective to now 50% objective. One stock that I might turn your attention to on Coho is the Snohomish Coho, which have an escapement goal of 55,000 fish. And you can see that right here in our initial modeling exercises, it's coming out as quite a bit less than that. We'll explore that kind of in subsequent slides. If we could move to the next slide, please. I thought I might touch on some of our preliminary modeling, and prior to doing that, I thought I might talk about what we've got in our starting model runs. So for Chinook right now in our starting model runs, we have all the forecasts for 2021 in the model. That's with the exception of Oregon forecasts as well as Canadian forecasts. We have all of the northern fisheries in the model. That's with the exception of West Coast Vancouver Island and northern British Columbia troll and sport. We'll get updates to those forecasts as well as to those fisheries probably in about a week from here. All of our coastal fisheries are updated in these preliminary model runs, and what they represent is they represent our initial ocean options coming out of the Pacific Fishery Management Council process. So just to very quickly speak through those ocean options that we're seeing. For non-treaty, we have a range of 3 different options there. A high option of 60,000 Chinook, a middle option of 50,000 Chinook, and then a low option of 0 Chinook. For treaty, we have kind of a little bit larger range of options, and maybe just going from the highest to the lowest there, we have a range of options from 50,000 Chinook to 35,000 Chinook to 25,000 Chinook to 0. One thing I would mention on coastal fisheries is that right now, Willapa Bay and Grays Harbor fisheries have not been updated in this set of runs just yet. Lastly, of course, for Puget Sound, these initial modeling outputs represent the 2021 initial model inputs for Puget Sound. So these are updated to reflect 2021 fisheries in Puget Sound. Looking at some of the stock-specific results that we're initially seeing here on Chinook, I might first look at Nisqually and Nooksack Springs. These are two stocks that are currently exceeding their objectives in some of our starting runs. However, we think that these ones are less likely to be as constraining to marine fisheries as some of the other stocks that we might mention here on the list. As I'd spoken to earlier, Skagit Summer Falls and Skagit Springs, those are two stocks that are both coming out as below their low abundance threshold. And given kind of the lower objectives they have this year, you can see how that initial modeling is comparing to the objectives. For Skagit Summer Falls, 38.2% or 32.8%. I'm sorry, I got my numbers confused a little bit there, versus a 17% objective. And then 15.0% coming out of that first model run versus a 10.3% objective. Moving on to two more stocks that many people are very familiar with. Stilaguamish and Midhoot Canal are two of our most commonly constraining stocks across north of Falcons. You can see what that Midhoot Canal rate is coming at near the bottom, 12.5% for the pre-terminal SUS. Stilaguamish, you can see what those rates are coming out right there on screen now. The one thing that I would mention on Stilaguamish is we have done some preliminary modeling, and we have kind of, we are noting that to reach those management objectives that we have for this year, there's about 124 or 123 fish available for harvest. Right now, the initial runs, the non-treaty models are coming out anywhere between 61 and 62 fish. So about half of that, half of what's necessary to meet those management objectives. If we can move on to the next slide and talk a little bit about coho. So for coho, there are really two things that I wanted to highlight here. First of all, looking at Skagit, we can see in our range of ocean option runs, we can see that we're between 39 and 39.9% with an ER ceiling of 35%. So that's one to be paying attention to in the future. The other one that I would turn folks' attention to is Snohomish, and specifically that Snohomish escapement metric. Once again, our escapement goal there is 55,000 fish, and you can see across our range of ocean option runs that we're not quite there on that 55,000. So that one will be the topic of kind of regional discussions coming up here in the future. Anyway, I think that's all I had on these. If I could turn it over to Mark Baltzell for the next slide.
Thank you, Derek. Appreciate that. Just wanted to highlight some of our freshwater fishery suggestions, expectations. It's labeled at the top, challenges and opportunities. So last year, if folks remember, we were able to have a mark selective fishery for spring Chinook in the Nooksack. Folks know that's been the natural stock's been a constraining stock for a long time. The hatchery stock is doing good enough that we were able to get that in there. Sounds like if things work out, we'll have that again this year, trying to get in there right before Memorial Day weekend, a little bit different earlier than last year. On the Samish, for folks who have been around a long time, we've had a number of different issues on the Samish over the years. We have had a suggestion out there for re-implementing a float rule, bait under a bobber kind of thing. So it's something we're considering. Also, just knowing we've had some issues with broodstock goals there in the Samish over the past couple of years. So we'll be looking to make sure we're monitoring that fishery pretty closely this year. Excuse me. Skagit is an interesting one this year. You know, Derek mentioned kind of the lower Chinook forecasts. We usually have a pretty directed fishery on pink and coho when they're abundant enough. Sounds like that's going to be the case this year. We have to be really careful though. We had some run reconstructions from the 2019 season in which the sport fishery really far surpassed our kind of modeled expectations pre-season. So that's one that we're really going to have to keep an eye on this year as we're crafting that season. Want to make sure we're trying to stay in those pre-season expectations. Also, the Soxhawtl tribe is proposing some expanded fisheries up on the Cascade. They've asked us to close some extra days up there, so just want to make folks aware that that's a potential this year as well. Stilaguamish, The pink forecasts are down this year, so we won't have any pink directed fishery. Sounds like that season may be a little similar to last year, maybe pushed a little later to stay off the below escapement goal forecasted pinks. Snohomish is another interesting system. We've kind of got a number of different issues there that we're trying to solve at the same time. We have some expanded brood stocking goals for the hatchery program on the summer fall population that we're trying to meet. We have quite a few pinks forecasted this year. I think a little over 500,000 pinks forecasted due to come back. And then Derek also talked about the coho issues on the Snohomish, that population was in overfish status. It's now in rebuilding status. So we've got some elevated goals there that we're trying to reach and stay off those natural fish. For Lake Washington, I think we're still planning that coho opportunity in September this year. Next slide, please. Green Duwamish, we've had some requests from our public to add a Chinook there to the daily limit, which would make it 2 Chinook. I think it's in our initial proposal, so we'll see where that goes in negotiations with the tribes. Also, I think there's additional pink opportunity on the Green Duwamish this year. Puyallup, Nisqually, I think they're going to be similar seasons to 2020 plus some additional pinks. For folks who have been around and listening, we do have some concerns with South Sound natural chum this year. Co-managers, both the co-managers are not planning preseason fisheries in marine areas. And so WDFW is proposing to preemptively close our recreational fisheries for 2021. We're working in some language into our agreements. If the in-season update that we use to update the chum run comes in at a certain level, that we'll consider opening sport fisheries depending on that. Excuse me again. Folks will remember the ongoing issues with the Snohomish River. Thus far, I can say it's closed until further notice. We have had ongoing discussions with the tribes. We are attempting to come together on potential mediation to try to get us back into the river sooner rather than later. And then just a do-over or a redo or a do again this year, mark selective opportunity on the Dungeness for coho. Next slide. So folks will know that, and Derek spoke to it, again, we're here trying to manage for the conservation of Stilaguamish natural Chinook. There's been lots of efforts made in that direction over the last number of years. Those efforts will continue with this year's fisheries package. Obviously, Derek also spoke of the other Chinook stocks of concern that we're watching as we craft fisheries. I think when we're looking at the spring stock for Skagit as well as the summer falls, a lot of that exploitation is in the river. But as we look to shape our package, we'll also be looking at whatever benefits that we can contribute to that exploitation rate. Again, Derek spoke about Snohomish. I don't necessarily need to rehash that, but other than maybe point out that the Wanda Fuca natural coho in the Straits is also in a overfish / rebuilding status for the natural coho. We have continued to not meet the escapement objectives for that aggregated stock group up there. The other thing I wanted to point out is, obviously closing the winter opportunities, the blackmouth fisheries last year was a significant move. One that we've heard about ever since, about anglers' desire to return that opportunity this year. Right now in our proposed fishing package, we are proposing a little bit expanded winter opportunity just in Area 11. That's mostly due to us trying to preserve options still at this point. We may consider some additional public input. We're also modeling some different ideas to see if we can't make some other moves that might give us some room to expand winter fishing opportunities beyond what we currently have modeled. Next slide, please. So with that, I think we're at the part of the meeting where we'd love to take your questions, your comments. I'll just leave this slide up on the screen so folks know we have some upcoming meetings. We'd love folks to attend and participate, and we can get it into that as we go later into the meeting. But for now, I think I can facilitate this. It looks like Carl Nyman is first. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah. Hey there, Mark. I appreciate all the thorough explanation of where we're at currently in the negotiations process and all the challenges that we have. I do, obviously, you know, a lot of us are really concerned about having a winter fishery that does not include Area 9. You know, my comment is just that Area 9 has the bigger fish and fewer sublegal fish. And I think a lot of us would rather see a shorter season in Area 10 if we had to, in order to have 9 open adjacently as a method of distributing angler pressure after what we saw last winter. That's my comment for right now.
Thanks for that, Carl. Looks like Brett Barkdahl has raised his hand. Go ahead, Brett.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm doing great. Good to hear your voice, Brett. Hope retirement's treating you well.
It is. Well, I could have been out blackmouth fishing today, but oh well. Hey, I'd like to go back and go a little bit more in depth into the modeling, specifically the inputs on Canadian fisheries. So I guess I have 2 questions. One is, how do the Canadian fisheries in general compare to last year? That's the first question. The second question is, for this modeling exercise, did we use last year's abundances of Canadian stocks? Since it sounds like we don't know what this year's abundances are. I'm just trying to get a sense of the depth of the issue here in meeting some of our conservation concerns.
Hey, Mark, I think I could take this one if that's all right.
Please do.
Thanks for that question, Brett. So last year was kind of an interesting year in Canada relative to recent years. With COVID, we saw kind of a decreased catch in their postseason from what we saw kind of in recent years. In fact, when I was looking across all of the Canadian ISBM fisheries, I was seeing a decrease anywhere between 20 and 60% of the recent year catch is what we saw last year. So I reached out to our DFO colleagues and I was asking them about that, and they had recommended that it was because of COVID and that there was less people getting out and doing fishing. They had recommended that this year coming up might be similar in those terms for some of the ISBM fisheries. However, as far as the AABM fisheries go, that would be WCVI troll and sport, as well as Northern BC troll and sport. Those ones are kind of currently still being modeled throughout the CTC model calibration process. And I just got an email, actually. I know that they had a meeting today at 3. I just got an email basically saying that that they still need some more time to work things out, and that they're still looking into things. I would expect that we would have numbers finalized for the Canadian fisheries by the 31st is when I think we would be looking at that. I don't know if that's helpful or not. I don't know if you had more questions to ask on that one. I kind of I just wanted to check in, I guess, and see if that's helpful.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks.
Thanks, Brett. Looks like Tori has his hand up. Go ahead, Tori. You can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
So you're mentioning on the Cascade how the Soxhawtl tribe wants to net a few days. Last year it was Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday that the tribes were netting, are those days going to stay the same, or are they planning more days? Hopefully it's only going to be those 3 days. And then the question is, are we planning bonus pink limits on any of the rivers or the marine areas? I know it was talked about doing either a 1 or 2 fish bonus limit. And then on the Skagit, I noticed on your proposal, it said it's going to open September 1st. Were there plans to open it August 16th to have more opportunity for the pinks? And that's all I got for now.
So I'll see if I can remember all those questions in a row, and I'm not sure if there's any, if the bio or any, if Edward's on the line tonight. So what I know about the tribal fishery is they've requested 3 days a week. I believe they've requested the same days. I'm not quite sure about that. I think it's a department position that there were a number of days last year that we noticed the tribe wasn't fishing, and then the river was closed and there was nobody out there fishing. We felt like or we feel like 2 days may be more appropriate for them, just to make sure that we're preserving that opportunity, but we're still in those discussions. I'm going to have to think back to your questions. So I think we have considered the August 16th opener. I'm not quite sure where that's at. As you'll notice, what I put in the slide was we were over what we had projected to catch in 2019, and we're implementing some creels this year to try to make sure that we're trying to stay within what we expect. Right now in the modeling, we're over on Skagit Coho. So I think from what I know, we still have some work to do to kind of specifically define a season. We've got a number of things working there. We know the pinks are likely to be in the river, earlier than that September 1st, but I think also, we've got some concerns for that summer fall population. You saw kind of the big gap we had in the exploitation rate there. And please forgive me, I forgot there's a question there I missed.
Am I still on?
Yeah, you're still on, Tori.
Okay. It was the bonus pink bag limits.
Bonus pink, thank you. So I don't remember if it was a bonus pink on the Skagit. I know in the marine area, we've made the decision to just have pinks be part of your daily limit. I know there's going to be some bonus pinks like in the Green River. I think the Snohomish River is going to be mostly a pink directed fishery, and if you get a marked coho, you can keep it. Yeah, thanks for that, Aaron. Aaron Bosworth said 6 fish bag limit for pinks on the Green. I think it's going to vary by system, just depending on what that run size is for pinks coming back.
Okay. Do you have an idea about the Skagit or Snohomish as far as possible bonus limits?
Yeah, I don't right this second, but I would say either stay tuned or send one of us. Thanks, Ed. And I don't know if Ed wants to speak up or if we can promote Ed to a panelist, but Ed just said 4 fish bag limit on the Skagit in the chat, in the Skagit and the Snohomish. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, Edward. Looks like Kevin Kelly is our next person in line. Go ahead, Kevin.
Hey, first I want to wish Brett best of luck on his retirement. It's been a pleasure working with him. Next, I want to curious, where are you at on the Samish as far as, I know you've increased egg take. What's the goal to get out smolt wise out into the salt? Where you got, and have they done improvements up there?
So I know we have some improvements in the works. I know that some of the hatchery issues have led to some of our us not meeting some of our broodstock goals, but I don't know if Ed's available to talk. He's probably much more knowledgeable about this than I am.
So when you guys are getting 8,000 fish back, why aren't you getting your brood stock? What are you shooting for?
I'm gonna let Ed answer that if he's available.
Sure. Pulling that up right now, Mark.
Thank you, Ed.
Because last
Yeah,
year,
just
I don't have a specific number, but I know some years you're up at 8, 9, 10,000. Last year might have been 6 that made it up to the hatchery. How do you come up with your goals? Because I know there was a lot of surplus last year.
yeah, we have a 10-year plan with Lummi Nation, and in that plan, our goal is 6 million for release at Samish. And last year we would have hit that goal at Samish, but we had some issues with infrastructure. We're rebuilding an intake at the hatchery, and so that caused us not to be able to get that whole brood stock. We came pretty close. We're thinking with modeling this year, we should achieve that brood stock. And our bigger question on hand for the Samish was, do we want to have the fishery as is, or do we want to consider eggs under a float? And was curious if you had an opinion on that fishery.
You've tried the float thing before, and that has not worked. You've tried multiple things before, that has not worked. One of the issues you have is there's people that fish different ways. Some people are really above board and, you know, release fish that aren't hooked right, etc. Things have changed up there over the years. You got a lot of new people in the area we fish. The other thing is the water quality when you're fishing with eggs during low tide is very dirty. It's very muddy. I go in and fish it at night, I used to, with spoons and spinners. It's a different visibility. But if you go up there and you look when there's people all out through the river, by the time you get down, it's kind of on the muddy side. Now, I will tell you, I have over the years in one area played around with eggs under a float. It's an area that has a snag underneath it, so it doesn't get a ton of pressure, and I kind of kick people out if they bug me. But some years I have a lot of success, some years I don't have any success. So it's going to really cut down things, because a lot of times you don't have a lot of flow. It's not like you're fishing the soul duck or the skycomish where you've got a good flow. And when you do have a good flow, a lot of times it's on the outgoing tide. Then you're dealing with all the seaweed and logs and sticks and everything else. So that just kind of creates, you know, one of the issues is you have so many people up there. Part of it is because of what you've done on what's happened on the Snohomish. So during the summer fishery where you got a chance to go catch a nice king, there aren't any other places unless you go to the coast. So you're bringing in a lot more people, throwing the internet, and you've got a lot of people from basically veterans to newbies that have no idea what they're doing and who's, you know, set on anything. So it's kind of it's a tough position for you, because over the years I've watched guys fish with drifting just bare eggs and letting it kind of float. A lot of foul hook fish. I've watched and tried basically plunking with maybe a corky and eggs. A lot of foul hook fish. And I've gone to a different method, some because I don't foul hook as many fish. You got a small area, and when you get a bunch of fish in there and a lot of people, but you also have to deal with the parking. One thing that's happened on the bottom is through peer pressure, you don't have the garbage down at the bottom bridge that you used to do when we started 20 years ago. And over the years, I've never really even seen a ticket written in that area. So I don't know if that helps. And if you ever want to talk, let me know. I used to talk to Brett once in a while. I kind of been going up there for a lot of years. I've talked to the game wardens. And as one sergeant said one time on our end, I asked him why he wasn't down there all the time. He said, "You guys aren't perfect, but you're pretty good. You self-police, peer pressure." So, and then where they closed up above, once you guys closed up above, moved a lot more people down. So you kind of got an issue. One of it is lack of opportunity. Does that help?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
And when do you think you're going to announce the proposed seasons for like the Snohomish and the Samish?
They're actually already up on our website, Kevin.
Okay, I looked earlier, I didn't see them.
Maybe what we'll try to do is put a link in the chat, maybe, or try to get folks a link as to where they are on the website.
Yeah, because I went into north of Falcon season setting and it wasn't there earlier.
Yeah, I think there's a tab for proposed seasons, but we'll let you know, Kevin.
But so going back to the first question, to meet your intake goal, how many fish do you need at the hatchery? And how do you deal with that goal when I see 4,000 or 5,000 fish surplus?
We have that goal. I don't know what it is offhand, but with the current fisheries that we have modeled, we should be reaching it. Last year we didn't surplus one female. The year before we didn't surplus one female, and so we're taking everything we can.
Okay, that's different than what I see on the website, so that's why I was curious. When you go look at the escapement on the website, it says there's a lot of surplus fish.
Yeah, and the reason why we see that a lot of hatcheries is because we see a lot of 3-year-old males coming in, and so we generally surplus those out, and we do that earlier in the season. But at Samish, they kind of come in all with the tide, right? And so, yeah, thanks for your questions, and reach out anytime.
Yeah, and it's good that you guys are, this all pays off for the saltwater fishermen with what you're doing up there.
Thanks, Kevin. Let's see, Dan Stauffer.
Okay, you guys hear me?
We can, Dan, welcome.
I'd like to comment on the float rule on the Samish. I've been over this more than once and had a lot of comments about it over the years. Going back to my tackle shop days, most of the people who wanted to get around any rule that was applied up in the Samish, they got around it quite easily. Unless you're prepared to give a very clear rule to enforcement to enforce and enforce it, you're just wasting your time. It's been going on up there for what, 2 decades now, longer?
Long time for sure.
Oop, hello?
We're still here, Dan.
Okay, did I break up?
A little bit.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Did you guys get the gist about how easy it is to get around the float rules or whatever you've been put in place?
Yes, thank you, Dan.
Okay. That's all.
Appreciate the comment. It's like Spencer has a comment. Go ahead, Spencer.
Yeah, actually, this question is kind of directed to Derek. I think last North of Falcon meeting, we posed the questions about increasing size limit to 26, and I was just wondering if he's looked into that and what that might look like.
Thanks, Spencer. I was doing a number of modeling exercises in advance of tomorrow. I haven't gotten to that one yet, and I could share more information at a later time, but it is something that I'm looking into and modeling and checking out to see what the effects are.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, looking forward to seeing that data. So
yeah, we'll be sharing that. I might, Spencer, if you're available, March 31st, we're having our next North of Falcon meeting. We'll probably be going into a lot of that exploratory modeling that we've done. If you aren't able to attend, that meeting will be available for you to view later as well.
Yeah, I'll be there.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Norm has his hand up. Welcome, Norm. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Norm.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
We can.
A couple of things. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend the advisors meeting the other day. So I'm not sure what was discussed there. I'd like to see us, if we do get any blackmouth season in Area 10, I don't have a problem with lining it up with Area 9, but I would really like to see us consider delaying that blackmouth opening to later in the winter. We keep having that sublegal problem, and it killed us again last year. And last year I pushed for later opening, and we did it a little bit, but not as late as I would have liked to have seen. Because obviously there are people that want to get out in the winter, but not nearly like in the summer. So that's one thing. You've already addressed my sleepless night Snohomish River issue. We're waiting for the Bureau of Interior to do something there. Summer. I would venture to say that to sacrifice any summertime to open a winter season would not be popular with the number of people that fish the summer. So I hesitate to even think about that or to consider that. And lastly, to go back to winter, a couple of years ago, we were discussing decreasing the size limit to 20 inches for winter blackmouth. Has that been looked at yet? And for right now, that's all. I'm sure as I sit here, I'll have other questions. Thank you.
Norm, do you mind if I challenge you with a question?
Not at all.
So I hear what you're saying about summer, but what I might put back at you is, what if we could still offer the same amount of time on the water, but maybe have less quota in the summer to make room for some winter fishery? No change in time on the water. We just convert to coho sooner. Just wondering what your perspective on something like that might be.
I understand the desire to increase winter fisheries. But to, again, sacrifice quota when most people are out there fishing for Chinook, wanting to catch Chinook, if we hit them, or if they are hit with a double barrel of a size increase, when we see Puget Sound Chinook over the last 20 years decreasing in size, adult sizes have decreased dramatically in the last 20 to 30 years. And then on top of that, decrease their quota, I think there would be a lot of disgruntled Chinook fishermen that wait all year for the summer season. I understand the desire for the charter fleet to have as much time on the water in the winter as possible. It's their livelihood. But I want to see more people buying fishing licenses, year-round fishing licenses, not for a couple of days as they come through Seattle to go on a cruise to Alaska. That's my thought.
Thanks, Norm.
I think we'll have further discussion on it.
Absolutely. That's why we're here. Thank you. Tony has his hand up. Go ahead, Tony. You're going to need to unmute yourself, Tony.
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Got a couple ideas on the nooksack, on coho and spring Chinook. I was listening in today with the Zoom meeting on the commercial guys. I was just listening in, and it sounds like they're going to go into Bellingham Bay a week earlier than normal for coho. And I'd like to see the nooksack open up for Rex a week earlier of September 1st, the usual opener. I'd like to see that open a week earlier for coho. There's a surplus fish, I guess, up at Kendall. So I think we need to get some opportunities with the non-treaty too. I think it's fair. And also on the spring Chinook, I've been talking to Edward a little bit about this today. Appreciate getting some more quality time up there on the spring Chinook, but opening up that spring Chinook fishery a week earlier, it's not going to work because there's no fish up there. Last year we fished the spring Chinook up there in June. In June 25th, it was pretty good fishing up there. So I would do the back end on the extension of 2 weeks versus the beginning.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate your comments as always. Sorry, I was getting an unstable internet message. Hope everybody can hear me okay. Looks like Tori is back in line. Go ahead, Tori.
Hey, so I'd like to comment on the Samish. I'd have to agree with what most people are saying about, not just allowing float fishing, because there's a lot of different methods that people like to fish. A lot of guys like to run spoons, a lot of guys like to drift fish, and some guys like to fish with eggs. I'll do kind of a combination of drift fishing and eggs under a float. So I think that would really limit a lot of guys, and people are going to find ways around the regs anyways, kind of like the guys running the jigs in the mud and snagging them that way, saying that the fish are biting it. And another thing is, this last year it was closed above the Thomas Road Bridge. Is there any plans to open that back up to I-5? I know there's a lot of issues as far as access and people trespassing different areas, but if we could get that area back open, or maybe have better access to that area, that's a nice area of river. You can get a nice drift in there, and it really spreads people out. I want to know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I don't have any thoughts, but I would defer to regional staff, either Edward or Andrew, if you wanted to comment on that.
I can take this. Thanks for your comments, Tori. We thought about this a lot, and the reason why that area was closed initially was two reasons. We're collecting the additional broodstock for southern resident killer whale and our 10-year goal, and so having the fishery in a smaller space, would essentially give us some more broodstock, and two, the kind of a trespassing and enforcement issues that we were finding with poaching in that reach. I know this year we're going to be doing some covert operations during that fishery, so you're going to see a strong enforcement presence. And as we keep these increases going, we should have plenty of broodstock coming in the near future, which would in turn let us open up more time and space. And so right now it's a little bit constricted, but that's not our long-term vision. So hopefully that answers your question.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks, Tori. Looks like Luke is next. Luke, you'll need to unmute yourself.
All right, can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
Great. Sorry, I joined a little bit late, so hopefully this didn't get asked already, but a couple questions about Marine Area 7 and 9. I saw you guys' posted proposed seasons up there, and under Marine Area 7, it doesn't mention a quota. Are we looking at a quota again this year, or is that going to be just based on the season date?
It will likely be a quota. I'm sure you're aware, the kind of the Stilaguamish impacts in area 7 are higher than a lot of other areas. We're going to need to make sure that we stay kind of within those conservation constraints. So yeah, we'll be doing in-season catch estimates and monitoring to run that as a quota.
Okay, so in that quota would spill over because you have that late August opening again, which last year was nice. I mean, it was nice when it was open all September, but at that time of year too, it feels like the hatchery to wild ratio is, I would say 10 wilds to 1 hatchery. Even that's probably generous at that time of year. I know last year fishing up there, it was I think one day particular. I'm not sure if I saw 1 hatchery caught, including my boat, but there was quite a few wild fish, nice fish, and I think a lot of those fish I've heard and read from you guys, in years past, are actually fish going back to Canada and aren't necessarily. I mean, I'm sure there's some, of course, but it's a majority returns going back to the Fraser, and I think a lot of those Fraser fish probably aren't even clipped. I know that's a whole separate issue, but just kind of your guys' thought on that fish. That's an opportunity, but I feel like it's kind of a semi-false opportunity in that there's not a whole lot of hatchery fish roaming around there by the end of August.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think we're really constricted about offering any non-selective time. We heard from a number of different folks that was kind of their preferred season, was to have that. Understand about the mark rates. Could I maybe just dig a little deeper? Would you prefer to maybe just have it run through from July 1 to wherever we get in August, until the quotas run out?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think for Chinook retention, if we're just going to talk hatchery only, I think that's probably it's probably a better season for hatchery Chinook retention. Of course, it's nice fishing for those larger kings, but if we're not going to retain them, then I'm not sure. It's just kind of a, I guess it becomes more of a catch and release fishery at that point. It feels like.
Yep. Thank you, Luke.
And I guess one last question on
Sure.
Area 9. Are we looking kind of a similar quota in the summer? I know there's talks about, moving quota to the winter and whatnot. And I know last year was a struggle with getting these Chinook to bite. But normally, as you guys know, it's a 10-day, if we're lucky, 2 weeks in the summer. I'd hate to see, us lose quota. It was nice that we had a little more quota last year. Unfortunately, we couldn't really use it all, but yeah, I just think with that summer, I think the quality of the fish are so much better than the winter, and it just seems like the high catch rate of sublegals when we open up in the winter, especially those earlier months, it doesn't seem like it's a good bang for the buck. I know, that's my opinion, and people have different opinions, but I feel like that summer quota is pretty valuable in Area 9.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. So as it's modeled right now, and I'm going to turn to Derek really quick. As it's modeled right now, it's a July 16th opener, and I believe the quota level's above 6,000. Am I right, Derek? Can you want to give us what's modeled right now?
Yes, that's correct. I can pull up those exact numbers if you want, but roughly they're about 6,500 fish.
Yeah, that's
and our season last year, running the full season, took less than 4,000. So it's a pretty healthy quota that we've got there currently for Area 9 in the summer.
Okay,
Thanks,
great. So I guess it's just one last thought. I know in the past it's been when we still had a quota, but it was opened all the way through August. Is there a negative to, if we still have the quota system, just to running it through August in case we don't use up that quota? And of course, if you use a quota, then it's closes when it closes.
Well, and so the thing about Area 9 is when we're done fishing for Chinook, the area still stays open. We'll have pinks and coho to go after this year, likely all the way through September. Sure.
Well, I guess the reason I bring that up is, like, for example, last year, right? I mean, most years I assume we would use that quota by then, but last year, if you caught an incidental hatchery Chinook, in that second half of August, you would have to release it, even though we still had, on the books, thousands of fish left in the quota.
Yeah, I hear that. That's something we can consider. It may take a little bit extra to to get extra time on the water, we'd have to think about how that works, to account for impacts, but appreciate the comment.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Carl, go ahead.
Hey there, Mark. Yeah, I just, I had to back up a little bit to some of Norm's points there. I appreciate he's representing his constituents and everything, but I'm not sure that all of these folks that are dead set on the maximum summer Chinook quota understand quite how the history of this process. When you start to lose fisheries like our winter blackmouth fisheries, and they stay out of place for more than one cycle, they tend to disappear forever. And these are historical fisheries that have never been closed until 2019-2020 cycle. Also with the comment about a place for charter boats to fish in the winter, we have about 20 charter boats in the Puget Sound operating, and maybe 10 or 12 of those guys operate in the winter and only part-time. So I saw the fishing pressure in Area 10 this winter. Some of the days were 150 or 200 anglers. This is not a charter exclusive fishery. This is a fishery that helps drive the economy in a lot of different areas in Washington State, including boat sales. It just, how it rolls. It affects a lot of parts of the economy. But that being said, I think, I continue to feel that restoring some winter opportunity, even if it's a very short season in multiple areas, should continue to be a pretty strong priority for the department, because if we don't set some kind of priority on this, and we will see it disappear, and it's going to be harder and harder to restore any of these. Now, as far as when you talk about, we don't want to give up our summer quota, I think that quotas and abundance are a lot more fluid than losing entire chunks of seasons, because as you go forward in this process on future years, our management objective changes, our abundances change. Unfortunately, our conservation objectives, our escapement goals have not gotten any easier. I mean, our abundance of fish has just not improved. Our recovery of salmon has not improved, and we do need to find a way to get there in order to get those abundances back up. But because these are fluid things, you could restore some winter fishing and in the future still have your Chinook summer season have good quotas. And I just want to reiterate again and again that I think that it's very important that we work hard to restore some winter fishing in multiple areas, even if it's a short season. And the other question, that was my statement. My question is, has there been, what consideration in this process has been given to earlier discussions about gear restriction or reduced minimum size in winter fisheries?
Are you talking about internally or with the co-managers?
Well, I guess both. I mean, are you still talking about it internally? And are you still thinking that it's something you might bring to the co-managers if you have not yet?
So I guess, Carl, my initial thoughts on a gear restriction are, I'm not sure that we've got enough data yet to feel comfortable. We've still got test fishers out there that are still fishing in Area 10, collecting data about that. We haven't really had any chance to compile all that and analyze it from this winter yet. So I definitely think it's something that we could consider. Now, whether we would put that in the model and get any modeled savings for it, I doubt we'd be at a place to do that this year. How we may get savings for it if we decide to implement it as part of the season. We could think about the savings that we might get on an in-season basis is just reduced amount of encounters, which could extend the season.
Yep.
So I would say it's not off the table. The Muckleshoot tribe, who you know who's been test fishing with us this winter, is very interested in, they've been participating in the study with us. We're going to go over that information together, kind of probably after north of Falcon, and talk through it and try to get some analysis done. I would say that's not off the table. And as far as reduced size limit, it's not off the table, Carl. I would say it hasn't dominated our discussions as a staff and kind of internally. I know the modeling staff has been tasked to take a look at a bunch of different size limits, both increasing and decreasing. And we're hoping to get that analysis together and share with folks about kind of what that looks like and impacts on different stocks and fisheries. So I think we're still at the point in this process where nothing's off the table. We've worked extra hard this year with our co-managers to try to say, our initial proposal isn't our final proposal, and that we want to make sure that we're preserving plenty of opportunities for change within some of the conservation constraints that we've already talked through. So that's the approach that we're taking this year.
Oh, thanks, Mark. It would be nice if, folks were a little more responsible on their own to just use plugs and reduce their encounters, but it clearly doesn't seem to happen. I mean, I'm not sure. I know some people are not in favor of a gear restriction. I think it's something that is good to keep in the discussion, because like you said, it could, even if it's not going to give you modeled savings, you could just greatly reduce your encounters and extend that season. These 3-week seasons in the winter are not helping us any, and it just doesn't help the fish any to have to release so many small fish. So I'm okay with it. I would support that type of rule if it's written in the right way, and I'd be happy to. I've already given written testimony on what I think about that. But I did notice the DFW finally gave the guys, it looks like an old enforcement boat, so they have a little bit hardier boat to not get beat up. I mean, you guys were looking for some OSHA damage there, to get breaking some backs in that little skiff they had trying to winter fish. So I was out there doing a flounder charter on Tuesday and pulling on sand dabs, and they're biting pretty good for the winter. And I saw the test boat out there, and they were clearly pulling plugs, because I saw them hook one fish and bring it up, and I saw the plug from where I was, and the other side didn't get a bite, so it must have had a plug on it. So it did not look like they were doing side-by-side comparison, or they would have been catching more shakers or more fish, period. But it was good to see that they were running at least one plug, probably two.
Yeah, I might want to confirm with Kirsten or Dr. Simonson, but it's my recollection that they said they hooked like a 78 centimeter hatchery fish the other day when they were out test fishing.
Yeah, they did. And it was released unharmed. So I did get confirmation on that too. They're actually mixing up the gear that they're using as well. They're randomizing it so that we get a pretty good idea of what's going on out there. It's not like they're just doing side by side. They tend to mix it up every day that they go out. They're kind of paying attention to that. So there might be a day that they run a plug on one side and a spoon on the other. The next day that might be 2 spoons. Next day it might be 2 plugs, different hook sizes. So we're randomizing everything, which is how we get the best data on what's actually happening out there. And that's all still ongoing. I have just barely started to get some of the data in. It's going to be a little while before we get through any of that, but once we do, then we'll have a better idea of how gear is operating in this fishery.
I'm actually so excited that you guys are having that type of gear study, because I think it could be very useful in winter fisheries in the future if we're going to have any winter fisheries. And we have to be creative in how we look at prosecuting these fisheries responsibly if we're going to have open water. And I did get a question. People were wondering, and you don't have to tell me this because I don't want to affect your relationships, but are the Muckleshoots keeping fish? I know that the Department of Fish and Wildlife release fish when they do their test fishing. I know the tribes don't really agree with a lot of CNR, but it's their choice if they want to keep fish. They're the Muckleshoots. So I'm out.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Mr. Patillo has had his hand up for a while. Welcome, Pat.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Carl has participated in the discussion. That's a rich one. It's a good discussion amongst advisors, Puget Sound sport fishing advisors, and and Norm made some comments too. And so I just wanted to add a few. This is mostly about winter versus summer. I really do think it's healthy for us to be considering what we value, but I think that the best guidance that we have right now is the Fish and Wildlife Commission's policy, North Falcon policy, and one of the general fishery management pieces of guidance that they have and have had out there for years is that when the department's considering non-treaty fishing sport fisheries, that meaningful recreational fishing opportunities will be distributed equitably and reflect the diverse interests of fishers. The winter fishery is different than the summer. We had some comments on the previous public meeting about this too, and I don't think that the winter fishery has, as Carl pointed out, it's not just a charter boat show. It's not an elite fishery, elite participants, as one person thought, and it represents diversity. It's the winter fishery has a really great history, and there are some things about biologically about the winter fishery versus summer fishery that are taken into consideration by the department, such as somewhat higher mark rates. So there's a lot of hatchery fish out there to be caught. The mark rates, like in Area 7, I think, are quite a bit higher in the winter than they are in the summer. It has lower impact overall. When winter fisheries a few years ago were about 2 or 3 months long, the total impact was only about 1% exploitation rate. So it's low. Summer fisheries are targeting, even though they're hatchery fish, they're catching mature fish coming back, and they're affecting unmarked wild mature fish. And so there are different considerations for each. I think we are richer for the fishery that we maintain that is diverse. And so that's my concern. And I hope we keep that in mind, that, as Carl said, some winter fishing is good. It doesn't have to be as much as summer, but it's really important to not exclude a type of fishing. The diversity is really important. So those are my comments, Mark. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat. Doug has his hand up. Welcome, Doug.
Hey, Mark. I really appreciate everybody's comments on this. And I've just been sitting here and listening. And, I had a question the other day about the winter fishery clarification. I'm glad we're talking about it a little bit more tonight. I want to echo what Carl Nyman and Pat Patillo is saying in their comments here. And I can't emphasize this enough, but, if we're specific to the winter fisheries, which I think it is a very different fishery from the summer, but when we're limiting that to one area, all it takes is one good weekend that, in the winter, we get one of those weird weekends and it's beautiful outside. And where does everybody end up? They all end up in that area. And it's a crowding issue. It's a pressure issue. And suddenly we've met our quota. And it's shut down. So, I would really hope that you guys consider more opportunity in the winter, but more importantly, more areas, so it spreads that pressure out. That way, guys that are in the southern areas, they can fish those southern areas. Guys that are up in the northern areas, they can fish those northern areas without traveling. Because if you leave them the only option to travel, they will. And it's a lot of pressure. And quite frankly, it's not fun to fish with that many boats around. That's all I've got, Mark. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Doug. Thank you. Looks Looks like Brett is next in line. Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, hey, Mark. This is, I guess, more of a comment than a question. When I was looking over the proposed freshwater salmon seasons, I was quite frankly, a little bit surprised about the opening dates on the Nooksack and the Skagit in particular this year, since these are pink years. The forecast on the Nooksack River is for pinks is 4 times the escapement goal. On the Skagit, it's 3 times the escapement goal. And so there's a large abundance of pinks predicted to come back to these rivers. As you know, there's large hordes of people that'll come out to fish for pinks. So I guess more than anything, I'm just making the pitch here that the average Joe 6-pack fisherman highly values pink fisheries, and whether these proposed fishing seasons represent prioritizing other things or not, I can't quite read between the leaves here, but I think it's important that we prioritize pink fisheries on a year, especially when we have very, very few other opportunities available to us. That's all.
Thanks, Brett. I'm sure Andrew heard every word you just said. Looks like Norm is next in line. Go ahead, Norm.
Yeah, Mark, I just wanted to chime in on what Carl was asking about. It's good to hear that the department is looking at the gear, because I really think that might be part of a solution, to put bigger gear in the water to try to lessen the number of those sublegals that we're hitting. And you know, I know sometimes I'm not very popular in the opinions that I espouse here, but I kind of look at it that yes, we have concentrated this past year. We concentrated 3 and 4 fleets into one small area. And we saw the results of all the sublegals that were in the area. We blew it out of the water. So the opportunity is there. I really, well, I think that's all I'm going to say tonight on that. I just wanted to let Carl know that, or let everyone know that it may be time to look at some gear restrictions to keep us off these small fish, because we're impacting our summer fishery and what we do in the winter. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments as always, Norm. Jacob is next in line. Go ahead, Jacob.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Thank you for posting that link to the season summaries. I don't know how I missed that earlier. And forgive me if this was already addressed. And a couple of commenters ago, he touched on it a bit, but so am I interpreting this correctly, that there is no proposed pink season in the Nooksack this year? Because by September, those are done.
I thought my recollection, and if it's wrong on the piece of paper, apologies for that. My recollection was that we were in there in August for pinks. Andrew or Edward, am I correct about that? I thought we were just trying to stay out of July.
That would be great. I don't see it on the proposed seasons here.
Yeah, we're in there August 1st. And so that, I don't know if that's just a typo or what. So yeah, there'll be fishing opportunities in the Nooksack for sure.
Okay, yeah, because I know in years past when we've had a decent season, it would open in July, but I'm not missing that anyway, as it's usually, we got no visibility and there's not many fish there in July. But yeah, and you know, just as a comment also, I mean, same thing on the Skagit. A lot of those fish are going to be past their prime if we don't if we don't get the opportunity to fish them before September 1st. So I'm definitely, would ask for more pink opportunities, especially because other stuff is so limited. Like we don't get a sockeye season this year.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks,
Thanks,
Jacob. Thanks, Jacob. I just looked at it. It is wrong. We'll get that corrected and fixed and back up on the website. So thank you for that. It's like Tony is next. Go ahead, Tony. Are you muted, Tony? I can't hear you. Not hearing you, Tony. Not sure what happened from the last time. Well, we'll come back to you, Tony, okay? I'm going to move to Tori has his hand up. Go ahead, Tori.
Hey, so I was looking at the marine areas, and in marine area 8-2, it looks like salmon fishing is going to be open again from the ferry down south to the boundary with marine area 9. I was wondering why that was chosen. I'm guessing it has something to do with the returns to the Stilly, but I was wondering if there was any way that we could maybe move that boundary up and maybe just close Port Susan, because right there in Port Gardner, sometimes you get that when you're humpy fishing out there, you get that south wind, and sometimes it's kind of nice to tuck around the point and fish right there in front of the Mukilteo oil docks. And back in 05, kind of the same thing happened where the Stilly was predicted low and they just closed Port Susan and closed it from, I think, the Tippecanoe down across to, I think, Priest Point. I was wondering what you guys' thoughts were on that.
Yeah, so the whole proposal for the 8-2 season has everything to do with Snohomish natural coho. The tribes in the state have really cut back both of our fisheries in that area in the last number of years. We know that we don't want to have no fishing, but we do want to really limit our impacts while providing some fishing. So that's why you'll notice, like in the proposal for the Snohomish, it's going to be marked selective for coho, and just pinks is really what we're going after. We're going to try to stay off those time periods when the coho start coming in the river. So same thing with the marine area. We're making it marked selective for coho. We know in that area, kind of all the way up to Mukilteo, we get some mixing in there as those stocks as they're coming through Central Sound on their way to South Sound, they tend to mill around in that area. So we do know that tends to be a higher mark rate down there. And of course, as we get later into September, that mark rate falls off too. So really the whole goal there was to lay off the Snohomish coho and try to get it as many pinks as we could.
Okay. Now I have one other question, and it refers to the Stilly. Now, this year the prediction is for 51,000, and last year in 2019, the pink run overall came way above the forecast, and there wasn't really anything done in season to open other opportunities like on the Skagit and whatnot. I know the Snohomish had opened up for 3 days in early September, but that was about it. What do you guys have in place to monitor run size if it comes in below or above what was predicted, and will you guys make adjustments accordingly?
Yeah, unfortunately on the Stilly, I don't think we have any ability to do an in-season update on the run size of pinks coming back to the Stilly. Since it is the preseason forecast is below the escapement goal, we're not really proposing any directed fisheries. In fact, the coho fishery is going to start a little later to try to stay off some of those pinks in the Stilly. Of course, right there from the forecast, the Skagit's got almost 1 million pinks forecasted to come back. So we have the marine area 8-1 as well as the river's going to be open for pinks in the Skagit too. So
now on as far as monitoring the run size, so we don't have those in place on the Stilly, and I've talked about this in past meetings. Why don't we have something in place on a lot of the rivers? Like the Alaskans, they put sonar and they put a lot into their in-season monitoring. Why aren't we, looking into that instead of dealing with paperfish? Because if the run comes in, say, below forecast and it gets fished on, we do the red sampling and then we realize, oh, well, the run came in low, oh, well, I think we need to have an ability to manage that, because on the Columbia, obviously you got the dams and you can manage accordingly, but we really need to have something in place here on our Puget Sound rivers to monitor our fish in season.
So I might just make a general comment about that, in that we do have some river systems that have the ability to update the run size. I know the Skagit does some test fisheries where we've benefited from that in the past. As the run sizes get updated, we're able to expand opportunity. The Snohomish is another one where the Tulalipes have a test fishery kind of out in the marine area that's worked well for Coho. The Muckleshoots have one kind of in LA Bay that they use to update for Chinook. So we do have some systems where we're able to do that. You talked about sonar. I know some of that has been or is being explored for the Skagit. I'm not sure if that's the same for the Stilaguamish. As you know, or can think about, those systems are really expensive to kind of get off the ground and operate. You have to have kind of an operator and a data analyst be able to run through all that information. Thus far, I think we're exploring that stuff, but the co-managers haven't identified any resources to try to kick that into gear or get it off the ground anytime in the near future. And if I said something wrong there, Ed or Andrew, please jump in. Thanks, Tori. Sorry, Tori, did you still have something?
No, that was everything. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, maybe I'll take a second here and just start talking a little bit about our upcoming meetings as it's up on the screen here. We've got a March 31st meeting next Wednesday where we'll go over some additional modeling. The co-managers are doing some further modeling tomorrow. The state is not proposing any changes other than maybe a few adjustments to some of our initial modeling inputs that were placeholders. So the state fisheries that are proposed on the website right now will remain the same in tomorrow's co-manager model runs. So we'll have those additional model runs to share next week at our meeting. We'll be able to go through some of the things, any more discussions that we've had with our co-managers between now and then about any additional fishery shaping or conservation needs that we need to address. So please, I would encourage folks to join us for that. That's usually a very thorough and deep discussion. It's kind of one of our last opportunities to spend as much time as we need to try to center on a fishing package before we head into the final Pacific Fishery Management Council meetings in early to mid-April there. I also wanted to point out on the screen next Wednesday, starting at 3, for folks who had the opportunity to attend some of our recent year meetings in Linwood at this time of year. We ended up having a plenary session with our treaty tribes, our co-managers. essentially what that is an opportunity for us to kind of stand up and talk about North of Falcon, talk about co-management a little bit, and allow the public to ask us some questions, ask the state and our tribal co-managers some questions together. So we really encourage people to check out the website, follow the meeting link, join us as you are able next week. And of course, we'll have that up on our website following those meetings too. If you don't have a chance to join us, please feel free to check those out as you are able. So I might just offer or ask if there's other questions or topics or things folks want to ask about tonight. Go ahead, Kelly.
Thank you. This is my first time sitting through this, so I appreciate at the beginning all that educational material. That was very helpful. I thank you. My comment and then question. My comment first is that I want to thank you, those that have actually put in southern resident killer whale quotas into the fishing. I've spent 45 years working with southern resident killer whales, so it's really nice to see that quota has been added and considered as almost similar to the tribes, and given that they're sort of the actual original natives. My question then to you, or whoever wants to address this, is how is that being received in the public? Is there an understanding and appreciation of quota for southern resident killer whales, or is that a resentfulness? And I know I'm literally asking a stupid question, but since this is my first time, I thought I'd take advantage of your presence. Thank you.
Well, I'll take a first stab, and then I would invite any of my coworkers or other policy folks who are on the line to jump in. The killer whale downturn is one that we've been examining for a number of years. We've been taking really deep dives into those fisheries effects, whatever they may be on the whale populations. We know that kind of the abundance of Chinook, their preferred food source, is an important issue. I wouldn't necessarily characterize anything as resentment. I think there's an understanding amongst the anglers that everybody wants a crack at the abundant food sources, and I think there's an understanding that we all kind of need to share. I really applaud our efforts as a department. We worked really hard recently with the Pacific Fisheries Management Council to undergo a review. Our modeling staff and leadership were highly involved in that and kind of instrumental in doing a lot of that science. In fact, I think we may have even worked with some folks to publish a paper out of that, a scientific paper out of that. So I think we're all on board with whale conservation as well as salmon conservation and how they're interlinked. We know that if there's more salmon, it's going to be better for whales. It's going to be better for fishermen. It's going to be better for everybody. So I don't know. Maybe I'll pause there and see if any of my colleagues or any others from the department want to add on to anything I said. I must have done such a good job. Nobody else needs to join me.
Exactly.
Well, thank you, Kelly. I don't know if you had any follow-up questions or if I missed one of your questions.
I appreciate that information and insight. And as I said, I think from being that the killer whale is my fisherman in my mind, and so it's appreciated that all of you are working so diligently to try to recover the Chinook stocks, and and it really is appreciated knowing how dependent they are on them. And so I just see it as it's really nice to see all of you taking the effort, and for those fishermen to understand that if they don't get the catchment that they want or the fish, sometimes those that get through and get by are the ones that are laying eggs and coming back next time. So I appreciate your time and all your work on this.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. Appreciate your comments. Tom Drews, go ahead, Tom.
Thanks, Mark. Can you hear me?
I can.
Hey, I appreciate Kelly's comments, and I do think that's important to us. But I do want to kind of reflect on what I think I remember from the Southern Killer Whale Task Force, that if, you know, all of the recreational fishing and possibly even all the recreational plus commercial fishing inside in the sound only takes about 1% or so of what the killer whales would eat in a year. So while we're trying to do our part and help, I think it's important that the public understands that recreational fishing is not the problem.
Thanks, Tom. Tori has his hand up again. Go ahead, Tori.
Hey, so I got a crazy idea. I figure this is the platform to do it. Has anybody thought about getting a sockeye run going on Lake Whatcom? My reasoning for this is we got a large kokanee population there. We've got a kokanee hatchery, and we've also got a collection facility for salmon in Whatcom Creek. You know, you could do something like what we got with Baker Lake, have a floating surface collector, truck the fish up from the technical college there and, you know, dump them in the lake, get a good fishery going. Figured I'd throw that out there.
Thanks, Tori. I'm not sure I would be the person to respond. I'd probably want to look to Ed or Andrew about that from the region.
Sorry, I appreciate the idea. When you said floating surface collector, the first thing that came to my mind, you know, how to do that and the expense. At Baker Lake, we spent tens of millions of dollars on each floating surface collector, and then all the infrastructure and personnel that takes to operate those. So it'd be an expensive endeavor to do, but is it possible? Yeah. It's just, where would we kind of get money to do that and continue the operations and maintenance of it would be our biggest challenge. But great idea, and we'll think on that one more. Thanks, Tori.
Thank you.
No idea is too crazy. We'll listen. So I might also remind folks, while we got a little pause in the action here, that for the PFMC meetings, starting, I think it's the 6th or the 7th, it might be the advisory bodies start on the 6th. We're going to start our morning check-ins through the PFMC process on Thursday, April 8th. That one's probably going to be really close, or a really short meeting on the 8th. I believe that's the day that at least I think that we're scheduled to go to the council with a singular ocean option for that day. So just let folks know we'll have that information, the meeting link up on the website. We'll be, since we're virtual now, they don't do PFMC meetings over the weekends. So we'll do those on Thursday and Friday. And then again, starting on Monday at 8 a.m. For those who are interested, there's also kind of a morning meeting that's part of the delegation through the Pacific Fisheries Management Council. They usually go through kind of council business for the day on that call, groundfish issues, other things like that, high seas fisheries, highly migratory species, as well as any salmon business that's going to happen on the council floor. Those links will also be available to folks, I believe, on the council website. So have a look out for those. Just kind of looking over here, I don't see any other hands raised. Are there any other questions from folks tonight? So I did see a question in the chat from Doug about the Coho escapement on the Snohomish. Doug is correct that previously the escapement level for the natural coho population on the Snohomish was 50,000. Because that population has been in overfish status and is now in rebuilding status, the co-managers have adopted an escapement goal of 55,000 to try to jumpstart that population. Folks will remember, kind of the coho crash back in 2015. That's one of those natural coho populations, as well as several others, including queets out on the coast, that haven't really rebounded since that time period. So it's one that's been constraining in recent years and likely will be at least for another few until we start getting some better returns on the natural coho. With that, I might just kind of offer up one last opportunity for folks to ask a question or provide a comment. Once again, I want to thank everybody for being with us tonight. We really appreciate your time and your passion when it comes to these fisheries. Having this format has been working really well. We believe that we're reaching a wider audience than we would kind of at a normal in-person meeting. So I would expect that these will continue into the future. As we learn, we'll try to make these meetings the least painful and the most smooth and helpful for everybody. I see I talked long enough that Brett has his hand up. Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, Mark. I guess my final question would be, when might we have a model run we can dig into, and the associated materials, such as, I don't know, catch breakdowns by the various fisheries in the various areas, so we can sort of start digging in and figuring out how we can solve some of the issues we have.
Yeah, Brett. So I think we were, pardon me for not knowing exactly what's on the website currently. I know we were working on trying to put some of the modeling products together to get out on the website. Just in case folks aren't aware, and we didn't really go over it in this meeting, currently there's a disagreement amongst the treaty tribes along the coast about what the ocean option should be for both Chinook and Coho. So we kind of have a lot of different options, modeling options for coastal fisheries that in turn kind of help decide kind of what's returning to Puget Sound based on what's going to happen in the ocean. So I think part of that is just trying to condense all that down so people don't get fused with 5 or 6 different options and which one's going to be which. So I know we're working hard. Brett, to directly answer your question, I would expect we'll have some of that stuff early next week from some of our coho or some of our modeling that we're planning on doing tomorrow. Be on the lookout for that. We'll try to get it out to folks or up on the website prior to the Wednesday meeting. So folks will have a chance to digest some of that information prior to that, so we can have a robust discussion starting on Wednesday. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Tori, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
I can.
So first, I'd like to say having the North of Falcon meetings on Zoom like this is really nice. It's very flexible and people could just do it in their home. So if we could continue this in the future, or maybe have a way to do both in-person and virtual meetings, that would be really cool. Now, second thing is, has the department looked more into broodstock programs, not just for salmon, but also for steelhead? I know Bob Kratzer was on the other day, and he's a big advocate for the broodstock programs. And especially here in North Puget Sound, we really need to do something. We need to, especially with our steelhead, and it's been very successful down in Oregon. Is that being looked into?
So again, I know enough information about this, Tori, to be dangerous. I'm probably not the most informed person on this call. We are looking at that where it's appropriate. I think some of the challenges that we've had in the recent past is when we develop these plans and these goals with our co-managers, trying to get that kind of final federal approval for some of these plans has been a little slow. I know they have kind of resource issues on the federal level too, not enough bodies to do the work. But a lot of our hatchery genetic management plans, which guides a lot of this work, haven't gotten approved in a timely manner. That's been problematic for us as we try to do stuff. I don't know if Ed wants to speak to it or not, but we have a program currently, I believe on the Snohomish that we're working with. And I think we're exploring other opportunities, but again, I think that's been problematic, and please help me out if I missed something or said something wrong, Ed.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. Yeah, we currently in the North Puget Sound have 2 broodstock programs going on with chum salmon, and one's driven by sport anglers on the Snohomish. So thank you to everyone that's participated. And we're, I think, our 3rd or 4th year into that. And we also have a program on the Skagit, working with our co-managers collecting broodstock. And I know you were alluding to steelhead a little bit. And we did some analysis on the Skagit to see if that was feasible, and it didn't really kind of work out mathematically for us to do that. But we're going to be taking another look at, not another look, but we're going to be taking a look at the Nooksack. That is something that our Puget Sound Steelhead Advisory Group advised us to do. I know Lummi Nation and Nooksack Tribe are very interested in starting an integrated steelhead program, but it's going to take some analysis and us figuring out how to do it right. And so that'll be coming in the near future, but we're just not ready to pull the trigger right now. So thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
No problem.
Well, again, I'm giving a little silent pause here to check and see if anybody else had a question or a comment or anything else for us tonight before we signed off. I see Craig has his hand up. Go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Right on. I have a question. So there was talk in the opening meetings about this blob is starting to show signs that it's retracting or whatever, disappearing. So with that said, does that mean, so the catches that are figured are for this summer's, river runs, how does blackmouth next year, they're returning fish for next year. So if they say we're going to have a bigger return next year, why are we stuck with still no blackmouth negotiated off of this year's runs?
So I'm going to try to answer that, Craig, and I might ask to Derek for some help. I think it has a lot to do with the way these fish are modeled with our management model. It has to do with kind of the recruitment. The management model works basically from May of this year through April of next year. So I think there's some calculations and determinations about kind of the projected abundances. We have some formulas where we try to project 2-year-olds from the number of 3-year-olds. And then that all gets factored into the model that, where we have coded wire tag recoveries that feed that model that help inform us of what those impacts are on our listed stocks. So it all kind of is a kind of a a complicated math equation that gets us to a place where we can kind of try to predict what those impacts are. You're right. It doesn't necessarily make sense kind of logically if we're thinking about returns. You know, because you're right, the blackmouth that we would be fishing on next winter have the potential to be kind of the returners in the following fall. So we don't have our management model kind of is within each year, and it changes each year with those new abundances each year. We don't have one that's kind of a continuous model that keeps going year over year that we can kind of update as we go along. So there's always going to be a little bit of variability and uncertainty to it. A lot of times in this business, we're looking backward to predict forward. So maybe that's the best complicated explanation I can give. And I might just turn to Derek to see if there's anything to add or subtract from what I said.
I think you gave a really good explanation there, Mark, as to how the model's working and kind of just the prediction that we're using in the model. We're using things like what we've seen in the past for maturation rates and mortality distributions and whatnot to come up with how those abundances are modeled. And just kind of the way in which we're doing that, we start our management year on May. And that management year runs through April the next year. It's kind of like what we're forecasting for is we're forecasting for that abundance that's coming back. Well, it depends if it's a fall or spring stock, but we're forecasting that abundance that's coming back in the coming fall. Generally, when you're talking about fall stocks, so kind of the next period after maybe October is kind of we age up in the model, and we kind of are predicting abundances from the age classes that we had in the forecasts coming for the winter portion of the next year. I don't know if that helps to explain it, but I think Mark did a pretty good job of that.
I mean, it does kind of explain it, but it doesn't everybody says that next year we'll have more fish, so we'll get more opportunity. Well, those fish that we would be fishing on next winter are those fish, right? I mean, we should get some opportunity at them. And it's just, I'm just throwing that out there.
So Craig, if I could, there's kind of two other things I might add on to there after your clarifications in that question. The first I might add on is that a lot of our management objectives are based on the abundances of each stock. And as we see kind of some of those key stocks, as their abundances change, so do their management objectives. And so one thing we could see is as those management objectives increase, maybe so too does opportunity. Another thing that we could see in the modeling is that all of our quotas are based on the abundances within the modeling. So the way that I'm modeling our fisheries is I look kind of at what the recent year effort was, and then I take that effort and I'm applying it basically as a ratio onto the abundances that are for each modeled stock. I kind of weight the abundances to where they're being caught and fished. So what stocks are contributing to those fisheries. So for example, if you're looking at Area 13, the South Sound abundance has a much greater effect than say, I don't know, the Nooksack abundance. Nooksack would have very little contribution to that Area 13 fishery in general. And so it's a little bit of a complicated model, but we are factoring in those abundances as we develop our quotas. So there's kind of two areas where, as we see, if we were to see kind of improvements on those abundances in the future, that there's two areas where we might see a little bit of change in what we're doing, both in terms of the number of fish that we're modeling in our quotas, and in terms of potentially getting to some of those higher tiers for management objectives.
Thank you. I mean, I appreciate the clear. I mean, yeah, it's over a lot of our heads, but yeah, and thanks for having these meetings too, guys. I mean, Zoom, I could never make a meeting ever, and last year was the first time I got involved, and it really opens your eyes on how this works or doesn't work or whatever. But thank you.
Appreciate the comments, Craig. Glad we can try to bring a little bit of clarity or maybe even more confusion to people. It definitely is a complicated process. We try to simplify it as best we can, but even those of us who are in it for a long time often find ourselves learning stuff all the time too. So appreciate your comment. With that, I might just see if any other questions or comments before I wrap it up for this evening. Again, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time to be with us tonight. Thanks to Derek and Kirsten and Edward, who provided me some support tonight, as well as Leah and Jake, who was running the slideshow tonight. Really appreciate all the staff. We all work together to kind of bring this stuff together and provide all the information we can to better inform you guys and hear what you have to say about the season. So really appreciate everybody's time. Again, we look forward to seeing you on Wednesday for both the North of Falcon meeting and the plenary session. Please stay tuned to the website. We're trying to keep stuff updated as much as we can on a daily basis. And again, thanks everybody. Take care, be well, be safe, and have a great night. And we'll see you next time. Thanks everybody.